Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neuro-linguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the AFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in both French or English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachdanamzlag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our fifth episode of season 23 a very special guest and expert in finding the happier version of yourself, Bona Normando. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Bona, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Thanks, Dr. Dan. It's so fun to be here. I am a happiness coach and teacher. I empower busy professional women to discover their personalized happiness formula so they can stop judging and comparing themselves to others and embrace their beautifully unique and authentic self today.
Beautiful, Bona. Well, thank you so much for being on the Happiness Journey podcast. And I guess that our love for the topic of happiness is definitely inspiring and whatever else. So if you could just tell me first and foremost, why did this topic of happiness, what were you interested in discussing and actually preaching happiness to others?
So I landed here because I was at a conference and the speaker says, "What's the dream in your heart?" And the whole auditorium erupted with people who had answers for this. And I didn't. I felt like I had a hole in the center of me. Like, one of these things was not like the others. Everybody else had this figured out and I didn't. And so when they all had their answers and my team turned to me for my answer, I actually just started crying because I felt unworthy. And so I took some time and I started thinking, well, how do you get a dream in your heart? And I realized that I needed to learn to love myself to be able to get there. And that even felt too big for me. So I ended up thinking, okay, I'm going to just start with getting to know myself and like myself. And the reason this was so potent for me is because I left home at 17 and I joined the military. And it was the perfect environment for me because every 2 years, they told you exactly what your next job was going to be and how to achieve it and how to perform. And I just fell right into that system. So people told me what they expected from me. I met the demands and life was easy. But there I was, hitting close to midlife. And I realized I don't actually know what I want and what brings me joy. And so I decided to go on a personal journey and start to figure that out. Like I said, I decided I needed to start to learn to get to know myself, but essentially learn to like myself for who I am, flaws and all. And in the middle of this journey, I was journaling and had this thought, what if there's somebody else out there like me who needs to know they're not alone? And just that little glimmer of hope that they're not that only person in a room of 5,000 people who really has no idea where they're going. So I had the idea to start my podcast. And at first I was like, oh, no, 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 no. I like my safe little life. I don't want to put myself out there to be judged, to be ridiculed. But then it just kept niggling at me that, again, if I could help, if I could get over myself and help one other person find their happier, start to learn to like and love themselves and really embrace their imperfect, beautiful self and live their best life, then that's what I'm supposed to do. So that's where I launched my podcast. And it really was it was kind of my own therapy, Dr. Dan. It was literally me learning all these lessons and saying, okay, I'm gonna try this. People say this helps with finding happier, learning to like and love yourself. So I just did it. And then I would go on the podcast and I would say, okay, this is what I discovered, and here's how it's working for me.
Mhm.
And for me, conveniently, I ended up I was planning on starting my podcast middle of March 2020, and then the world shut down. So I delayed for a little bit. I had a very great friend who said, now more than ever, you need to put your voice out there. And so again, I had to learn to get over myself, and just started putting myself out there. And the really crazy thing that happened was I found other people like me. And I think especially during COVID, people were looking for a bright light or something that they could do to help themselves. And so every podcast episode has a challenge in it. So not just listening and hearing me, but actually then taking it and attempting to use it yourself and decide, does it work for you or not? Just because it works for me doesn't mean it'll work for everyone, right? And so that's how I became passionate about helping people find their happier, because I believe it's not a destination, it's the journey, and we're meant to enjoy it, right? But we're in the driver's seat. So really what I wanted to do was help people get back in the driver's seat and realize that you can't change other people. The person you can change is right here.
That's so true. But then again, if we know that happiness is very subjective, it's something that we all experience in our own little world, if we could call that. What makes you happy may not necessarily make me happy. For some people that are poor, I mean, the poorest in this planet, they could be extremely happy versus those who are the richest in this planet and be miserable. So we all know that happiness is not related to a material asset or anything else. So, but unfortunately, as we just discussed before we started this podcast, Bona, we have social media. Social media is filled with a lot of fake. A lot of people that show that they're living the best life, the best vacation, and so on and so forth. So when we look at all that, we say, why don't I have that? Why are people so inclined to be able to compare their life, which is definitely not similar to anybody else out there, but yet they still feel there's a void, and because of this void, they're miserable. And because they're miserable, they cannot feel or reach the level of happiness that you or I can try to preach. So should we just shut down completely social media so there's no point of comparison with anybody else? Or how can people manage those comparisons?
Wow, is that so well put? So I think, first of all, I think social media can be used for the good as well. Now, that comes from someone who is not really out there a lot on social media, because that's not my happy place. And I've discovered that about myself. But you can connect with people, you can find like-minded people. So if you're around people who are not wanting to make the positive changes that you want to make, you can find those positive groups. I think we are in a culture of comparison, and that's just how we've been raised. Even as a parent, I found myself worried about my son trying to fit in. And that was kind of one of my biggest indicators when I realized I needed to change, because I wanted him to fit in a box and fit in and not have conflict, when I realized he's this beautiful, unique human being. And what I need to do is help him know who he is.
Mhm.
So the comparison of social media, I think part of it is, like I said, I think social media can be used for good, but it is absolutely a very hurtful tool. And like you say, fake, where people aren't showing their true lives. And so what I think is important is knowing the difference and ultimately figuring out what works for me and getting to know yourself. And I think that when people hear me talk, that's the one they like to skip over, because it is really taking time to be real and say, actually, I don't like that, and I don't need or want the responsibility that comes with a 5-bedroom house with 5 bathrooms. That, again, not my happy place. So learning things about yourself and going on sort of this self-discovery and saying, okay, that makes that person happy, but that does not bring me joy. And a really great example I love to give people for this is, we live in a very extrovert society. And my son, I think he came home from grade 4 or 5, and he had taken this exam. I think it was called 16 personalities. And he came home and he goes, Mom, look, I'm, 61% introvert and 39% extrovert. And I was really surprised. I always thought my little guy was an extrovert. But then I took the test and I got the exact same numbers. And if you know me, I'm a very social introvert. So I love people. And what I've tended to do in my life is overextend being around people because I love them, and not realizing that what an introvert doesn't mean you're shy. It just means that you need time alone to regenerate and recharge yourself, right? And so whereas my husband is, we jokingly say, 99.9% extrovert, during COVID, we had to say, okay, go have a driveway party with your friends because you're two introverts. We need time alone, right? And just knowing that it's empowering to realize that there are people who need to be around people all the time, and something isn't real for them unless they share it with someone else. Whereas for me, I had to learn that or not creating time for myself by myself to just be and recharge, hugely important, so that when I am around people, I can show up as the best version of myself, not the cranky one who's overextended and doesn't want to be around people anymore. And just those kind of things. It's that knowledge, it's that self-knowledge to be able to say, that's great for you, but that doesn't work for me. And being able to set those boundaries and ask for what you need, I think, is a huge part of finding our happiness.
But then again, don't we people as like, if we compare nature versus nurture, we have the tendency to always want to be the people pleaser. So we do everything to make others happy at our expense. So for us to be able to find happiness from within, do you think that it is better to just let go of that pursuit of making other people happy and be selfish?
No. Well, yes and no, okay? Because I think it's not selfishness, because when I take care of myself, I can give my best self to the people I care about. And so we just had this discussion with our teenager the other day. He agreed to do something with us, an adventure as a family. And then when the time came, he didn't really want to go. A body at rest remains at rest. And he was trying to make his dad feel guilty for making him go. And I explained to him, I said, listen, if you don't want to go, then up front, you have to say, I'm not going. We gave you the option and we invited you. If you agree to go, then what's really important is you're going because you know it will bring pleasure for your father. And you go because this is a gift you want to give him, but you don't attach guilt to that scenario. So it's being able to say, I'm not doing this because I really think I want to go. I'm doing this because I know it will bring joy to the other person. And again, I think that changes the energy that you show up with, because I always say, if it's a fake yes, it's it's not genuine and it doesn't feel good for either party, right? So if you are able to say a genuine no, thank you, I don't want to go, then sometimes the other person might get their feelings hurt, but it's a true, honest, you're being fair with them and fair with yourself. But if you say yes, what I'm trying to teach our son is that if you say yes because you want to spend time with your family, then be all in and be there, and don't blame anybody else. Don't try and put the guilt on. It's owning it, I think, and realizing, why did I say yes? So as we're learning these, and I've really found this about myself, as I learn and I say, I realize, oh, maybe that wasn't a genuine yes, but I've committed. So now I'm going to show up as the best version of myself I can, because I did this because I wanted to please that other person or bring them joy. And then the learning is next time when I say yes to them, I'm saying no to something else. So I have to, think about it and process it and say, who do I want to say yes to right now? Them or me? Because even if I want to go, being the introvert that I am, it could mean that I'm not showing up as my best self the next day because I haven't given myself that rejuvenation time I need for whatever else is on my schedule. So there's so much self-awareness, I believe, that is involved with finding your happiness. But again, the responsibility it's on us, but it's so empowering once you start doing it, because then you can respect it in other people. And instead of judging them, you can celebrate their ability to ask for what they want or say no when they genuinely mean no.
So does it fall under the opportunity cost if you do something at the expense of not doing something else that means more to you? Because then at the end, people will always kind of feel like they're dragging their feet, having to do something for the other person, even though deep inside they don't want to do it. And at that time that they said yes, it was convenient for them to avoid getting into a conflict. But when the time comes of the day of the activity, something else may come up. They may feel ill or fake illness, and just to be able to not be accountable for their, I would say, negative action, or for them, rejecting the offer of spending time with family. So how do you balance this out? I mean, it's what was then and what is now are two different timelines.
Right, absolutely. And I think you nailed it when you said it's convenient and easy to say yes in
Yes.
the moment, right? Because it's like everybody's happy. I don't have to have conflict and explain myself. But I think, one of the things that I really believe is a powerful tool is reflection and review and journaling. And so just learning from those instances and saying, wow, if I really would have thought about it, or if I would have said, I'm not sure, can I get back to you
Okay.
tomorrow? Then you have time to process, look at your schedule and say, can I show up fully as my best self in that situation? Or do I need to make a decision that's better for myself? And again, when we first start doing this, it's not always pretty. It can be ugly and there can be some self-judgment and stuff, but that's where I honestly believe that as you get to know yourself, and I'm a big fan of journaling because I think that's honest conversation that you can have with yourself. You can cheer yourself through the tough stuff and say, okay, that's the decision I made this time, but next time, here's the stance I want to take. And it's just learning and processing and reminding yourself some of the decisions that you've already made. And it's okay to
Mhm.
say, to not give that immediate yes if there's, that niggling feeling that says, maybe I need to think about this.
That's so true. So now there's a big movement, not a movement, I would say, when it comes to um, emotional intelligence. Now, this has become such a hot topic nowadays that it supersedes the IQ. Because if you have emotional intelligence, you could definitely easily manage your own personal or intrapersonal feelings versus intrapersonal relationship what you have with others. So you could feel their their fear, their pain, whatever it is when you have a high EQ. So does that promote happiness when you can feel other people pain and you know how to manage them, you know how to be able to be helpful to them? Does it help you in return, or do you absorb their negative?
So, yeah, great question. I personally believe, so I'm an empath. I feel everything. I can be in a room and sometimes I think I know how my husband and son feel before they even do, which can be a burden. Because you have to learn how to feel those emotions and deal with them yourself, I think, before you can really help other people through it. So I think when we're talking about emotions and other people's emotions, personally, this is not my area of expertise, but from working with myself and, the people that I've worked with, I always think it's important. It's that saying about putting your oxygen mask on first. So you cannot help someone else through their emotions if you aren't dealing with your own.
Right.
So once you learn how to deal with your own, and sometimes dealing with your own is just simply having that boundary and being honest and saying, I can't handle this right now. I don't know how to help you. I'm not your person. Maybe there's someone else right now, but I'm not equipped. And being honest with yourself, because your responsibility is, again, that oxygen mask first. If you can handle it, you do what you can to help them, but ultimately you have to, you're responsible for taking care of yourself first.
That's so true. But then again, aren't people too afraid to be able to be too blunt with the other person and say, hey, I cannot deal with your problem because I have my own problems? Because if it's someone that is just a friend or an acquaintance, okay, that's easier said than done, or actually easier done than said. But then if it's someone that is close to you, you do not want to disappoint them. So how do you differentiate what is with someone that you would not care how they think about you versus those that you do care what they think about you?
Well, I think it's the same thing again. I think is when you get to know yourself and how you deal with stuff, you can then suggest where people can get help. I'm not the expert. I'm not the person for you. So how about we find you help, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a social worker, those kind of resources are out there. And I think you do people a disservice when, and especially loved ones, if you're not the one holding their hand, helping them get the right help and not thinking, I can't fix everything. Right. And so I'm raising a teenager, and there are days where I think, where is the handbook for doing this? Right. Because, when we wanted to get pregnant, nobody warned us about these years. And I think This has been more emotionally exhausting than the sleep deprivation when our son was younger. And being able to help him find help, but then get my own help to help him through his stuff. And that I think comes from knowing myself and being self-aware enough to say, we all need help to figure this out.
That's true. And how old is your son?
16 going on 29.
But well, I have a 5-year-old and he's going on into 21. So trust me, I know the pain. He doesn't come with a manual and he's like the little Tasmanian devil. So I know exactly the feeling and I'm afraid to see what's going to happen when he's going to hit 16. Um, so you mentioned something about, okay, feeling where you could be a disservice to them if you try to be able to give them an advice that you're not an expert in. So do you think that you can compensate the lack of giving the advice by probably giving them a few number of therapists so they could be the one contacting that therapist? Because at least you're going to find a good balance where because you didn't help them on one side, you could help them on other ones.
Absolutely. And I think my general rule is if you lead with love and you just the best way you can help someone is lovingly accept them for who they are, where they're at right now. And absolutely find the help that the people that will help them deal with whatever they're going through. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you go and coach, you said you coach mostly women to be able to find the best version of themselves, the best happy version of themselves. So is there like a specific program that you follow, that they follow to be able to kind of like be more gradual into reaching ultimate happiness?
Yeah, so I believe I have a bunch of tools and I talk about putting tools in your toolbox. So I have a course I created called Kickstart Your Happy, which gives people sort of the first 12 basic tools for their happiness toolbox. And what we do is I walk through, we discuss them, and then I recommend they decide which ones appeal to them the most because I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think all the tools can help, but we all kind of want to start where we're at with different things, whatever appeals to us. And I think the best way to get momentum is progress. So if they choose the ones that appeal to them most, and then, in my courses, we have the learning material, but then we have coaching because once you start to implement it in your day-to-day life, it's different than just theoretically knowing, oh, this could help me until you go to try and use it. And then it's like, well, there's a few roadblocks here. And then my family wasn't supportive or it didn't fit into my life the way I thought it would. And it's just really starting where they're at, figuring out the best tools for them, and success builds momentum. And then we can start working on other tools. And again, I always feel it's more like a smorgasbord. Like, here's some ideas, pick the top one or two that you want to start with and grow in them. And then, we later down the road, we can, once you feel good with that, okay, what's next? What else am I willing to add into my toolbox? Or where am I at in my life right now? I didn't think this one interested me, but suddenly it's at the top of the priority list. So let's focus on that one.
So, is there like a specific timeline or like a length in the program, or people can start at any specific areas of your program, which is, can they, like if they say it's a step from 1 to 12, can they start number 8 or can they start number 9? Or do they still have to go from, part 1 or step 1?
Yeah, no, because, I've put the tools in the order that I think works. But I honestly believe, so what I do is once somebody signs up for the Kickstart, they have access to all the videos and they can binge all 12 if they want, or they can pick and choose the ones that interest them. They're very bite-sized. And that's just sort of the foundation. I think the actual learning happens in the coaching. So whether that's a group coaching as part of the course, some people are busy and the timings don't work for them, so they go with one-on-one coaching. And really that just lets us focus in on what is your hot button right now that you want to work on that you think will get you your biggest success the fastest.
So how can people find you, Bona?
So we are thehappieryou.net. And I also have a group, the Happier You, on the Facebook group where, there's tons of updates on what's going on, what's coming up next. So, but thehappieryou.net, you can sign up for my happy notes and I'll keep you apprised of what's coming up in my world and the latest podcast episode aimed at keeping you motivated to be working on your happy.
So your podcast, is it you and a guest, or is it just you on the podcast and you talk about things in general?
It is both. So it started out as my personal journey saying, hey, I tried this happiness tool and here's how it works for me. And I'm heading into season 5, and I think not everybody wants to keep hearing me. So I've started interviewing other people who have skills that I don't have, or they have inspiring journeys that can remind us all that we just start where we're at. So it's a fun mix of both. And then this season, we're going to start adding some live coaching. So just so people can see the power of that outside perspective to help you think of things differently and maybe unlock some more success.
Beautiful. Well, Bona, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your incredible story in being happy. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode. I'm also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 23 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories just like the one that you listened today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Embrace the journey of becoming a happier version of yourself by nurturing your passion, practicing gratitude, and fostering positive relationship. Let go of the self-doubt and focus on your strength, celebrating your achievement, no matter how small. Prioritize self-care and balance, knowing that taking time for yourself is essential for your well-being. Surround yourself with uplifting influences that choose joy in every moment. Now remember, happiness starts from within and is cultivated through mindful choices and a loving attitude towards yourself. Embrace each day as an opportunity to grow and shine, and watch as your happiness transforms your life. My name is Dr. Dan Emzalag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.